The two main questions when it comes to travel are when it's going to start again and how it will start again. The when is very difficult to answer because it depends on the policies of each particular government. The how is something that can be discussed now and perhaps should be, because having it organised will make sure that when it does restart, it will restart in an efficient manner. Alexandre de Juniac, who is the chief executive of the International Air Transport Association, which is the trade body for airlines, has been saying something similar just in recent days. His point is that the airline industry and airlines in particular need three types of support. They need direct financial support, they need loans and loan guarantees and support from the corporate bond market by government and by central banks, and lastly they need tax relief. All of that is undoubtedly true from the regulation side. Yet at the same time, Lufthansa has been saying it will take years for demand to come back and has permanently grounded some of its aircraft. Well, to discuss what and how and when aviation may come back, we've got a good friend of the magazine, Richard Tams, who spent much of the last 20 years working in airlines and now runs Tailwind Advisory. So Richard, thank you again for joining us. The big question for everyone is when travel will return and how it will return. Now, the when bit, I think, is a bit much to ask you because no one knows when travel will return. But how it will return, you've got experience of how this works. How does an airline start to stimulate demand again after a long break?
Okay, well, first of all, in terms of how aviation might start again, as I say, I'll avoid the question of when.
Yeah.
I think there are a number of things that will mean that it's going to be a gradual return to normal, and we'll come to talk about what that normal is and the new normal moving forward. But first of all, there's going to be an operational requirement that's going to take time for aircraft to be remobilized, to be taken out of the desert, put back into service and flown again. So that's going to at least delay full capacity being returned for a while. I think also you're going to see, and we're already seeing signs of it from various carriers, basically retiring aircraft early or putting aircraft into returning it to the manufacturer. And though you're going to see a sort of more permanent correction in capacity across the whole market. And I think most carriers at this point are expecting, capacity to be reduced and very much in line with demand. And that reduction in demand is going to be driven by a number of things. One, it's going to be driven by nervousness of flying, particularly among the leisure passenger. It's going to be driven by restrictions on travel continuing, or requirements for temperature testing and that sort of thing, which will obviously put an unnatural cap on capacity. But it will also, I think, be driven, and this is the unknown, but I think it's got to be something we've got to think about, is that people are becoming more and more familiar with video conferencing, with virtual presence and all that sort of thing. So I think that even if individual business travelers are not saying to themselves, I don't need to go and travel so much as I did, I think certainly companies who are going to be strapped for cash are going to be saying, you know what, it's worked for the last few months, we're going to require you to do a lot more of this moving forward. So in summary, I think, all those factors are going to mean that capacity is not going to come back to the level that it did, certainly for a long time. And we may have seen a permanent correction in capacity in the market.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Lufthansa seems to indicate with retiring its older planes and saying, if capacity does come back, it will take years. I mean, from the airline's point of view, okay, there'll be some business travelers who are desperate to start traveling again because it's their job, they're in sales, or they need to go and visit factories or other offices around the world. But what can the airline do to stimulate demand? I mean, I think you've got experience of previous times when it was tough, maybe not as tough as that. What did you do, or what did the airline do when people just weren't traveling, or you were trying to stimulate them to travel?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and the answer is it's got to do something big. I remember in my first years at BA, and this is going back a long way, we had the first Gulf War, where airline travel was reduced considerably, nothing like to the extent that it has done over the last few weeks. But at the end of the Gulf War, most airlines were trying to persuade leisure travellers in particular, to take to the skies again. Now, there was a nervousness then about the safety of flying and the worry about sort of terrorism and the security. Moving forward, it's going to be a concern for leisure travellers about safety and becoming exposed to the virus. So the airlines will need to do something big, and I think it's going to be in those days, the days I just talked about, they did the world's biggest offer, as it was known, where every seat on every plane on a certain day, I think it was the 23rd of April, were free. It made a lot of noise and it got a lot of interest back into flying. So I think the promotions are going to be a combination of garnering people's interest in flying again and capturing people's imagination for foreign parts and warmer climates. But critically, it's going to be accompanied by some really heavy discounting. So there's going to be some great offers on offer. That will be dependent on a route by route basis, depending on how much capacity is back in the market. There may be some routes that continue to be capacity constrained for restrictions reasons, which will mean that the airlines do not have to discount to cover. But once Spain opens up again, or the Caribbean or Florida, I can see a really big push by the major carriers to get people on board with some very competitive pricing. So it's something to look forward to, Tom.
Yeah, low prices would be wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that, Richard. Thank you.